I guess, and this is echoing what most of the papers are saying today, you could be forgiven for wondering just what Labour said when they were in opposition and running up to the election that they actually meant.
Liars.
I mean, just to explain, because not everybody knows what a Waspy woman is. So these are a group of women against state pension inequality. Yeah. And it all goes back to when the state pension age was changed.
Men were 65, women were 60, and it was equalised.
And it would equalise. And regardless of the decision to change the age, regardless of all of that, this group of women, and there are a lot of them, felt that they weren't properly informed in order to make their decisions. So we're speaking to one lady who, head teacher, thought she was going to retire at 60, thought she had enough savings, so she actually retired a little bit earlier because she was involved in caring for her elderly parents, and then suddenly found she had a gaping hole until 65 to fill. Now, a parliamentary ombudsman, independent ombudsman, ruled that that wasn't the right way to go, that there was maladministration.
In that they weren't...
And yet...
Yeah, they weren't notified sufficiently in advance, because it wasn't... Maladministration wasn't going from 60 to 65, which John Major's Conservative government decided to do. It was accelerated under David Cameron's government, but it was notifying people of the change. Now, I think it's a betrayal. I think Labour's betrayed the Waspy women, and Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, Liz Kendall should all be made to eat their work.
Hang their heads in shame.
The Labour manifesto in 2015 and 17... No, sorry, 17 and 19, when they lost, promised to pay the Waspy women. The 2024 one didn't, because the last Conservative government didn't pay it. It kicked it down the can down the road. It had the Ombudsman's report and it ignored it. A lot of bills have come due on Labour's watch. 12 billion or so was infected blood in the Horizon IT scandal. In the budget, the 25 billion increase national insurance on employers, very controversial, but half of that is going to go to infected blood.
But
no, we've got to explain it though, Richard.
It may not have been in the manifesto. You're right to say that.
I think it's a betrayal, but I'm explaining the position because I know he's just going to go on about it.
I'm going to say they're liars.
They're liars. You're right to say that it wasn't.
They're liars.
The Ombudsman said between 1,000 and 3,000 each, which would be between 3.5 billion and 10.5 billion, and they're saying they haven't got the money.
Kevin, you're right to say that it wasn't in the manifesto, and it wasn't in the manifesto. But if you look at these pictures, these are Labour front benchers now.
Deputy Prime Minister.
In opposition, and they were campaigning with the Waspy women, who they say today, the Waspy women, that they have every right, under the rules of common sense and fair play, to have absolutely assumed that they were going to have the support of the Labour government. You're right.
That's why I said it's a betrayal.
Look at those images.
But Kevin, yes, exactly.
Chancellor, the Prime Minister,
and
the Deputy Prime Minister.
Look, whether the money should be paid or not, because, you know, financial terms of exchange. Of course, the government said, look, we've got to sort the NHS, we've got to sort this, we've got to sort that. You know, there are debates about whether it's right to be paid. There's debates about what the Ombudsman meant in terms of how much financial harm they got. The problem is the optics. As you saw, Liz Kendall, the person that told these women yesterday they couldn't have it, is standing there, the worker pension, saying they can.
Hey, I agree.
So in terms of Labour, this is bad.
Of course it's bad.
Kevin's got his waffle. I'll tell you, they lied. They've lied and lied and lied.
I'm giving you the facts and the background, and I sit here day after day, and you say spend, and then you oppose taxes.
You're in power
that's why your sums never add up. You live in your own fantasy land.
Your lot are in power.
You are in the same land.
Prime Minister lied.
Starmer,
Prime Minister
Reeves and Kendall as they were. You never paid.
Kevin,
you never paid.
Let me just remind you
when you were in power.
The Prime Minister,
paid.
But Andrew, that is true, isn't it? That they're trying to sort out the bills.
The Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Chancellor, and the Work and Pension Secretary all said they would be paid. They campaigned with those women.
They would say they then looked at the books, so the Conservatives have left.
Oh, black hole, they've lied. And
the
pensioners watching this programme will think, yeah, and they've stolen our winter fuel allowance
they have
as
done,
well.
Kevin, shouldn't they have done their sums before they made those promises? If they now say, oh, actually, now we're in power, we realise we can't afford even a brass farthing of what we promised, shouldn't they have worked that out before they won the election?
Look, I think it's a breach of trust, which is why I believe it's a betrayal. Because if you're sidling up to those women with their placards, you've been pictured with them, I've been pictured with them.
They're very nice women and they're very vocal.
Their protests are the politest I've ever seen. You see them outside Parliament. They were outside Parliament on Budget Day.
They're at every party conference.
When the money that the Tories never paid was produced for infected blood, Horizon, the Fujitsu post office scandal, but there was no mention of the Waspi women, and the alarm was sounding then. They were originally, some of them, asking for between 10,000 and 50,000 each. The Ombudsman, when the Ombudsman came out under the Conservatives, between 1 and 3, I thought, you've lost. You're not going to get the full amount.
1 and 3,000.
Yeah, 1 and 3,000.
Daily Mail's front page.
It should be paid by Labour.
You know, Andrew's paper says that it shows they'll do anything to get elected, Labour. How lasting is the damage in trust, do you think, to the government?
Look, I think can I just say, with pensions in particular, having taken away the winter fuel allowance, which affects 10 million pensioners, pensioners are going to be thinking, this government just don't like us. And you talk to a lot of pensioners groups that say that's because a lot of people, Labour, think pensioners vote Tory.
Keir Starmer said he was going to restore trust in politics.
Well, this isn't going to help, is it?
Is it the final nail or just another nail in the coffin of that?
What do you think, the final or the...
No,
no, they've got a few more lies to tell, Richard. There'll be a few more lies coming down the road.
You can't say what other promises will be broken.
Lies.
Or,
lies.
Although it wasn't in the manifesto, I agree. You felt that they were going to give it because they backed the Waspi women all the way.
The winter fuel allowance.
It was unambiguous support, wasn't it?
The Daily Mirror, we backed the Waspi women all the way. And when the Ombudsman report came out, right, their recommendations, they're not policies straight away. But if you want rules-based government, which, again, Starmer says he does as Prime Minister, well, you get an ombudsman, an independent ombudsman, who looks at how the government is being conducted all the way back to John Major's time and finds that women have been cheated, misled, not informed, then you should honour that. You just should be duty-bound to honour that, never mind all the other pledges you've made in opposition.
Before we move on to another story, can I just read you this? This has just come in from Mifanwi on our email account. She says, my poor mum isn't getting the winter fuel payment, and now she's not getting the compensation for her pension age rise. I am so angry. See, it is a perfect storm for pensioners, isn't it?
I'm afraid it is, because... And they're going to say again and again, they don't like us because we vote Tory. And, of course, that's a misrepresentation, because, of course, not all pensioners vote Tory.
If Labour's doing what the Tories would have done, but it's worse when Labour
but they said they wouldn't
because they back the campaign.
It's when the top four in the Labour government, the Chancellor, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Prime Minister and the working pensioners, all said it was going to be paid. All four of them hang their head in shame.
I would have thought if we mined, we'd find that every member of the Cabinet has backed the Waspi women at some point.
And by the way, the Daily Mail will be pointing that out and because we'll be going.
Well, there we are. Good. Well, get on with it.
Thanks very much.
There are researchers already going
and then put up and admit the Conservatives wouldn't pay either. No, do it. But again, you've got to join it up. You want to spend, but you never want to tax, and that's where your sums do not add
yet again.
Up.
They lied.
So it's empty rhetoric from
more
you.
broken promises.
Let's move on to another story.
Empty rhetoric from
Are we being fair to the police this morning? The police watchdog has basically heavily criticised the police in Southport for not being ready for the riots, and more broadly across the country, our police forces generally not being ready for the riots. But none of us were ready for those riots, were we? I mean, it came out of a clear blue sky.
Well, that's what I think, actually. I'm a bit surprised by it. Who would have thought that was going to happen? The terrible murder of those little girls, shocking and terrible. Nobody would have anticipated that.
Well, I think what they said is that they should... Well, what the report suggests is that they should have paid more attention to other far-right groups and other demonstrations and had more of a handle on what was there and be prepared to react. Again, you might say it's unfair, but it did shock everybody, not just the original horrific murders, but the reaction and how quickly it felt like you were in a rioting country, didn't it?
If this had happened 20 years ago, the murder of those girls, I think it would have been different. Social media, of course, whipped it up.
I think
that's the difference.
I feel it's a little unfair on the police. You've dealt with the horrific murder of 3 girls at a Taylor Swift event, and some of the police officers who were attacked by the rioters were people who'd been dealing with a terrible, terrible case. No, I think it's very. We don't live in a police state.
I totally
Whatever
agree
the
with
nutters
totally
on social media.
I think we're being very harsh on the police.
Therefore, you expect people to normally behave well.
Yeah.
You do not expect a tragedy like that to be exploited by people spreading lies and conspiracy theories
on social media.
But we also need to be prepared, and lessons need to be learned. And I guess that's what the report is doing, isn't it? It's thinking, if this happened again, how could we ensure that we didn't see, you know, a week's worth of pictures?
But how do you stop? What do you do? Do you shut down social media?
Yeah, well,
is that what we're suggesting?
It would help if some hard-right politicians, people like Nigel Farage, didn't fuel the lies.
Well, it certainly endorses the court's stringent punishments on people who were posting the messages that you're talking about. And there's been criticism of that now, saying that they were too heavy-handed, they shouldn't have been sent to jail. It's one of the reasons the jails are overcrowded. But the courts were trying to send a signal, weren't they, saying if you incite riots online, you're going to go to jail.
Yeah.
If you incite murder, and you call for people to be killed,
and hospitals to be burnt down with people inside.
Yeah, there we are. You can criticise government policies and comment on events until the cows come home.
Yeah.
But you can't incite murder and hate.
Now, I thought that the train strikes were all behind us now. It's all done and dusted. But if you get the Avanti West Coast, then from the new year, you're not going to be able to travel on trains on Sundays because the managers are going on strike now.
All the way through till May.
They had this...
Kevin's speechless.
No, I'm just thinking over Christmas and New Year.
They called them off over that period.
I think we'll find more trains are cancelled by engineering works, actually, than are by strikes. But there are going to be strikes on this line.
Starting on New Year's Eve.
Relying on overtime to run a railway shows you're running that railway badly. That private company, which will eventually come back into public ownership, runs a bad service. You shouldn't be relying on overtime to operate it.
Well, they got a massive pay rise to train drivers. Was it 15% over 3 years?
It was below inflation.
Inflation busting.
It was below inflation. That's untrue.
15% over 3 years is an inflation-busting pay rise. They're on about
$66,000. It was 11% in 1 year.
£66,000.
Anyway,
very nice, thank you. But they didn't. The government, the idiot woman who did the deal, who's now been fired from the government, Louise Haigh, didn't make sure that weekends were involved. So now they're going on strike.
Oh, this is ridiculous. It's not train drivers involved.
It is it's train managers.
It is the manager.
The deal was done. Hopeless.
It's like sitting
another disaster with this government.
Sitting to the ball in a corner of a golf club here.
Another disaster.
I mean, the Conservatives didn't do brilliantly on stopping the train strikes either.
Oh, but Labour were going to sort it all out. And when they did the pay order with the train driver, she said the former Transport Secretary didn't last very long, did she? Because she incited a strike on P&O.
She didn't incite a strike.
She said nobody should use P&O.
Yeah, which is what Grant Shapps, when he was Transport Secretary,
nobody should use it. Anyway, she was fired.
Over mass
16% pay rise, and they're going on strike.
Thank you very much. You've just mangled.
Thank you very much. Another disaster on Labour.
A load of nonsense.
Kevin, you just mentioned Nigel Farage. I would imagine Nigel Farage is waking up this morning with just the hint of a smile on his lips. Because
more than a hint, wouldn't we say?
It's looking more than likely that Musk is going to make a massive donation to reform,
I mean,
which would transform their prospects.
Richard, if I make you know, that image there of Elon Musk, Nick Candy, and Nigel Farage. Nick Candy, of course, being treasurer, I think, of reform, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, that looks like somebody who is going to have a lot of influence, certainly on X. They must be very pleased with that big reform.
I'm kind of chuckling, as well as shaking my head, thinking, there's Nigel Farage, the great plastic patriot who said he wanted the EU out of the UK, and he's now going over the USA to get an American, Canadian, South African citizen to buy British democracy. That's what he's doing. He should be.
But Nigel Farage says, "Fine, if you give me 100 million, because we'll work together."
If it's legal,
so we can become the 51st state of the USA.
It's legal,
but it's bad news for your lot, isn't it? It's bad news for your lot because reform basically robbed you guys of the election.
The Tories
came through the middle and took the vote.
Look, the Tories lost the election because they were useless and deserved to lose, but reform pinched loads of their seats. Of course, there's no doubt about it.
And they weren't particularly well organised then.
But they're in
second.
Yeah, but they're in second place, I think, in 89 seats where Labour have an MP. This is a worry for Labour too. I can still envisage a possibility of a massive breakthrough for reform at the next election, and I mean massive.
Yeah.
And having this money will help.
I don't know how many people had the time yesterday. I made time for this, to watch live news feeds. I was watching on Sky at around midday as Mr Justice Kavanagh was giving he was delivering his verdicts on this terrible murder of Sarah. I've never seen... I mean, I don't think the news clips that many of you will have seen later in the day kind of did it justice. I have never seen a more devastating summing up by a judge. And I certainly felt the cameras never show the defendants in the dock, but their insides must have turned to water because it was quite clear what was coming. 40 years for the father, 33 years, absolute minimum for the stepmother, 16 years for the uncle. We were talking here yesterday about exemplary justice. Do you feel exemplary justice was handed down yesterday?
I did, actually, and I don't think I've ever heard a judge's summing up which is punctuated by applause in the court, from people in the court, because people were so... they'd sat through this trial, and the horror and the violence that was meted out to that little girl regularly by him, that disgusting father, and the stepmother went along with it.
So the father is 43. To get minimum 40 years, that makes him 83.
He will never come out.
He may not survive.
He will survive in prison, no.
Good,
but I think the broadcasting of some decisions by judges is a great step forward in public understanding and glimpsing, because you're right, you see the whole narrative of the judge.
Yes, why he's come to this decision.
Look, judges are bright people. You get a kicking when things go wrong, sometimes deservedly so, sometimes not, when only little bits of a judgment are picked out and taken away from their context. But there you saw the lot.
Yes.
And you heard the description of the personification of evil.
Yes, which, I mean, I think that's the gut feeling we all had as it unfolded in the case. And also I thought it was interesting that the judge also talked about homeschooling, which is something we spoke to in the Education Secretary. That felt like quite a going even beyond the sentencing, didn't it? Just to really make a point, which I think would have rammed home to people.